So we're taking a look at some basic laboratory techniques, essentially making a mixture and then using different methods of mixture separation to exploit differences in physical properties to get the components of that mixture back in separate phases then. So we've got, first step here is to use your chemical scoop to acquire about 3 grams of salt here. So I've got sodium chloride table salt. I'm going to put my weigh boat on the digital balance, make sure I hit 0 to get rid of the mass of that. And then I'm going to add about 3 grams. It doesn't have to be exactly 3 grams, even if it's a little bit over. So I've got 3.40 grams. That's okay, as long as I record that actual mass somewhere. Then I'm instructed to transfer this 3 grams of salt into my 250 milliliter graduated cylinder and do that, making sure that I get all of that out of my weigh boat. Next, I'm going to use my scoop to acquire about 5 grams of sand. That sand is silicon dioxide, and using my scoop I just need to get about 5 grams. I've got about 4 1/4, and I'll try to get a little closer this time. 4.93, pretty close there. 5.04 grams of the sand, and I'm also going to transfer that sand to the same beaker that has the salt in it. So now I have this mixture of salt and sand. The next thing that I need to do, using my graduated cylinder, is measure about 80 milliliters of distilled water. The squirt bottles have distilled water in them. And I can take the cap off here to measure out again about 80 milliliters. It doesn't have to be exactly 80 milliliters. There we go. And all I need to do then is just record what that actual volume would be, looking at eye level. I've got a volume here of about 79.4 milliliters. So then I'm going to add the water into the mixture of the salt and sand. I'll use my glass stir rod here just to stir the mixture for about a minute or so here. So now that we have our mixture of the salt, sand, and water, before we start to filter, we want to make sure that we grab the mass of a piece of filter paper here and record that mass of, here 1.18 grams, so that after the filtration is over and we've collected that solid sand that was left behind, we'll be able to subtract off the mass of the filter paper so that we know the mass of the sand. So after about a minute of stirring, I've got my mixture here. The salt should have dissolved into the water. The sand, which is insoluble in water, remains at the bottom of my beaker here. And I'm going to filter my mixture, so I should be able to take advantage of the fact that I have an insoluble substance in that water. I can separate that insoluble solid. I'm going to fold my filter paper in half, and then I'm going to fold it in half again so that it takes on this shape almost like a cone, because I'm going to try to get this to sit down into my funnel here that I have sitting in the ring stand. So if there's 4 layers that I've now generated, I'm just going to put 3 of those layers on one side and 1 on the other, so that that sits nicely down into my funnel. Use a little bit of distilled water, even just to hit that real quick, and press that down in so that it stays and doesn't come out. I'm going to use a process called decanting, which is just a fancy way to say pouring off the liquid while leaving the solids behind. Ultimately, I'm going to want to get all of my solids into my funnel with the filter paper so that I can retrieve the sand whenever I'm done. But in the early stages of this, I don't want that sand kind of gunking up the pores of my filter paper. So I'm actually using a process of decanting here, using my stir rod to help me to pour off that liquid while leaving the solids behind. I'm going to continue with this process until I get all of my liquid passing through the filter paper, seeing that I'm collecting a relatively clear filtrate underneath. And then I'll show you here in a moment how to get the remaining sand out of the beaker. So you eventually get to the point where all of the liquid that was in there has gone into my filter paper, and I'm left with this sludge of my sand kind of at the bottom, and it's difficult to pour that off. So one technique that I can use is to take advantage of the angled head that's on my water bottle here. and I can invert the beaker over top and then use the squirt bottle to knock that solid off of the beaker and down into my filter paper, okay? So allowing the rest of the liquid to go through. Once the liquid passes, I'm gonna pull the filter paper out, spread it out, let it sit on the countertop overnight, and then we'll be able to come back tomorrow and get the mass of our dried product to see how much of the sand we were actually able to recover.